My beloved, do you think it's an accident that you're hearing my voice right now? No. Heaven planned this moment long before you took your first breath. Here on Holy Voices, we share the whispers of eternity, the messages that change hearts and awaken destinies. If your soul is ready, stay with me, because what you're about to hear might be the very word your spirit has been waiting for. Every dollar you give vibrates in the spiritual realm. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6, verse 21. Let your $10 gift into Holy Voices become a vibration of light. The moment someone does something you vowed they could never do is the scariest thing ever. It's more than just an effect line. It's true. Human behavior research demonstrates that when confronted with what they anticipate, people do not break down. When the script they wrote in their minds doesn't fit reality, they fall apart. And this is precisely what just took place. They had their timelines, their hushed computations, their small forecasts about you. However, you made a move that no enemy guidebook, algorithm, or rumor could have predicted. They're caught staring in bewilderment now, reliving every action you took like amateur detectives, wondering how the story got by them. Tension. It is where they reside. It's soaking into them. The amusing aspect is that some of them are most likely attempting to convince themselves that they are fortunate, which is the standard justification offered when someone with brilliance surpasses them. Therefore, don't be surprised by what you just accomplished. Buckle up. The entire game was rewired. First of all, you revealed their reliance on delusion. Their entire power was based on delusion rather than reality. Real power was never what appeared to be it. Mirrors, smoke, and a skillfully staged spectacle designed to make you question yourself were all present. In order to make you feel like an outsider looking in at something greater than yourself, they fabricated images, fed you stories, and stacked the stage. In actuality, though everything was brittle, and the instant you deviated from their plan, you revealed how much their power hinged on your consent to accept the delusion. They weren't particularly strong. You were led to believe that they were. Their presence, their words, and their authority. Without your attention to support it, none of it had any real weight. Their fire was fueled by you. Their spark went out the moment you stopped believing in their image. They are now coming to terms with the unsettling reality. You were never under their control. Only the story you believed to be true was under their control. This explains why your maneuver struck them so forcefully. The discovery that the action compelled was more important than the action itself. You broke through more than one barrier. The walls themselves were paper thin, as you disclosed. You demonstrated that the stronghold they talked about was actually made of cardboard that had been painted to resemble steel. Because you can't see what's below after the mask is off, that exposure shakes people in ways they can't get over soon. They put too much faith in the illusion's permanence. Thus, they weren't ready for this exposure. It never occurred to them that you might doubt it, much less destroy it. Furthermore, they are now addressing more than just the consequences of your behavior. They are coping with the disintegration of who they are. When their phony image is no longer credible, who are they? When the crowd leaves because there is no longer any enchantment in the act, who are they? They are now doubting everything because of this. They are left to fumble, overthink, and question everything they do, due to the obvious fissure in the foundation they were standing on. Now, what appeared to be control has turned out to be dependency. The reality is also harsh. They have nothing left to rely on, without illusion. Second, you rendered their story pointless rather than merely shattering it. Not only did they lose their story, but you also negated its value. Only when people can continue to believe in a story does it have power. But it crumbles under its own weight as soon as it no longer corresponds with reality. You did precisely that to them. As long as you complied or said nothing, their statements, gossip, and well-crafted lies might endure. However, their entire narrative lost all significance the instant you took an action that demonstrated the opposite. They are still able to detect it. They are still able to do it. But now, when reality itself won't support it, it sounds flimsy, almost embarrassing. Their true annoyance starts at this point. They relied on repetition for so long. When you say something enough times, people will begin to accept it as true. That was their strategy. However, Repetition only works when there isn't anything compelling enough to refute it. You didn't merely use words to dispute them when you made your move. You entered the room with indisputable evidence. Furthermore, proof is unavoidable once it is seen. People who used to agree with their version of events now pause since the evidence doesn't support their account. For them, that indecision is fatal. You simply place doubt where no one was expecting it to, and doubt spreads more quickly than belief. The nice thing about it is that you could interrupt their story without having to quarrel with them. You didn't have to yell or make an effort to persuade anyone. You just rendered their version unimportant. They can't tolerate that kind of loss because it takes away their authority. Being proven incorrect is one thing. Watching your story vanish into thin air as the truth subtly replaces it is quite another. It compels them to acknowledge that their impact was always based on performance rather than substance. They are currently in the worst conceivable situation, trying to sell a script that no one is interested in anymore. Every word they say only serves to highlight how far from reality they are. They have the ability to double down, but doing so simply serves to emphasize how desperate they are, and they know it in their hearts. Their narrative is no longer valid, and the timestamp that signaled its conclusion was your move. They're doubting everything because of this, because they have nothing left to employ as a weapon in the absence of a compelling story. Thirdly, they assumed that your patience was consent. They assumed you had given up because you were patient. They interpreted your failure to respond as weakness each time. They considered every second you delayed to be a win. They failed to realize that permission is not the same as patience. You were not submitting to them. You were studying, calculating, and watching. You were providing them with every piece of rope they required to reveal themselves. You were storing energy, even if they believed you to be inactive. They believed you were done, but you were just picking the appropriate time. And the conclusion that your silence had never been their protection was just as shocking as what you did when you eventually took action. What worries them the most is this. They had grown accustomed to their delusion of power. They interpreted your silence as paralysis and your restriction as fear. But fear isn't restraint, it's command. Refusing to lash out too soon requires more strength than holding back. And it became clear that you hadn't been helpless at all when you eventually took action. You had maintained total control throughout, allowing them to expose their tendencies, vulnerabilities, and reliance on your alleged inaction. They are now forced to relive every second and wonder about every stillness. It has come to their attention that you weren't ignoring them. You were researching them. You weren't putting up with them. You had been getting ready for them. They are forced to acknowledge that they were never one step ahead, which is a deeper comprehension than the actual move. They were permitted to believe that. It's a cruel irony. They assumed that delay meant loss and celebrated too soon, unaware that you were the one who put them in that position. They boasted and told themselves you were surrounded. The truth was exposed by your behavior. You weren't left behind. You were anticipating accuracy. And the entire illusion they had created fell apart in an instant when patience and accuracy finally clashed. All of their presumptions about you now seem dubious. They are no longer certain that what they see is authentic, because they've discovered that you can maintain control while holding back. They suffer from such uncertainty, and this is the most difficult pill for them to swallow. Your silence, which they believed to be an advantage, was instead the prelude to their downfall. Fourth, you turned into the uncontrollable variable. The assumption that you will always be predictable served as the foundation for their confidence. They relied on you to think and react in a particular way, and to remain within the lines they subtly built around you. You had to be a role in a play they had already written for their entire system to work. The deception, the manipulation, the false order. However, everything they had created started to fall apart the instant you left that script. Their method of control is predictability. They can plan their retaliation before you even take action if they can predict your next move. They can use it as evidence against you if they can predict how you will respond. They looked at you so intently for that reason. Why, they were fixated on your routines and behaviors. They were programming you, not only observing you, and they believed it to be effective for a while. They didn't anticipate your capacity to disrupt your own pattern, though. You did something that wasn't consistent with the story, and you lost all control in that one instant. Their dependency on order is revealed, which is the true power of being unpredictable. They require organization. They must be in charge. Everything must be in line with the plans they secretly created. You don't simply throw them off when you break that rhythm. You destroy the very framework that gives them a sense of authority. All of a sudden, they're the ones who are taken by surprise, rushing, doubting, and challenging all of their presumptions about you. This is the sting that exacerbates their situation. It is impossible to falsify or use tactics to combat unpredictability. They will never be able to completely trust their control after you have demonstrated that you are capable of acting outside of their script. The concept will haunt them every time they attempt to move against you, even if you do nothing else. What if this time they don't respond as we anticipate? What if they do it all over again? Their system is poisoned by that mistrust. You turned into the variable, the wild card, and the element they couldn't control into submitting. That makes you the most dangerous aspect of all, the one they can't control, anticipate, or rewrite. In a world where their preoccupation with control is the foundation, you torch the stage on which their script was written, not just stepping off it. Fifth, you use their surveillance to support your claims. They believed that the best way to keep you under control would be through surveillance. Every look, document, and hushed detail they gathered was intended to corner you and mold you into the persona that suited their purposes. They held that power was equal to knowledge. The manner that same information would turn against them, however, was something they never considered. It revealed them, not trapped you. It showed how much time, effort, and desperation they put into observing you, rather than making their hold stronger. What was supposed to demonstrate your weakness now serves as indisputable evidence of theirs. Fundamentally, surveillance always reveals more about the observer than the observed. While the person watching is trapped, fixated, and fixed in the act of attempting to control something they cannot control, the person being watched continues to live, move, and evolve. And that's precisely what took place here. They believed they had the advantage because of their constant surveillance. In actuality, though, it showed how much they depended on you. Their system is useless without you. When you're not there, their whole business falls apart. The illusion of authority they once displayed is eliminated by that fact alone. They are unable to turn away from the evidence, now that it is there like a mirror. They are proven by every document they own, note they wrote, each piece of evidence they believed they possessed on you. Evidence of their obsession, anxiety, and inability to turn away since something about you jeopardized the foundation of their power. The irony is also scathing. The better the evidence against them, the harder they attempted to make it against you. They are unable to acknowledge the depth of this reversal, because they lose their authority as soon as surveillance is shown to be an obsession. They no longer appear to be controllers or leaders. They appear to be observers, stalkers, and desperate individuals attempting to imprison something that was never intended to be imprisoned. And now there's no denying the reality. Your throat chakra aligns when you speak faith and release generosity. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Matthew 12, verse 34. Support Holy Voices with $15 and let your voice echo in heaven. How helpless they truly are was made clear by their attempt to contain you. They believed you would be exposed by the spotlight. Rather, it revealed them. Furthermore, no amount of concealment can change their reputation once people realize who was actually dependent on whom. Their confession has turned into their weapon. Sixth, they believed that power was the essence of strength. You demonstrated to them that time is crucial. They thought that strength was the ability to dominate with sheer force, shout the loudest, or push the hardest. That was their way of thinking. A society in which power is equal to intimidation. They used the amount of noise they could create, the number of individuals they could influence, or the force with which they could impose themselves as indicators of success. However, you showed them something they weren't ready to comprehend when you took action. Strength has nothing to do with force. The timing is crucial. Everything that brute force finds difficult to maintain can be destroyed with a single, well-timed move. You didn't do anything ostentatious or theatrical. It was not necessary. True power hits where it counts most, not where it screams. You saved energy while they wasted it trying to overwhelm you. You examined the fissures in their structure while they struggled to look sturdy. Additionally, you were not required to press against a full wall when the time came. The entire thing fell apart on its own when you touched the one weak spot. Your move, therefore, had a greater impact than anything they could have done with all of their bluster put together. They now have to confront a reality they detest. The emptiness of force is revealed by timing. In contrast to the accuracy of your action, their yelling, manipulating, and attempts to subdue you appear desperate, even juvenile. Since you weren't playing the same game, you didn't have to battle them on an equal footing. You weren't attempting to demonstrate your superior strength. You were demonstrating the absurdity of their notion of strength. For them, the consequences are severe. They used pressure, threats, and force to stitch everything together. However, those items can only support so much before giving way under their own weight. However, timing has the power to instantly alter the entire path of events. You completely change the battlefield, not simply outmaneuver them. Since they now know that one well-timed move can wreck everything, they can no longer rely on force. And the actual wound you leave behind is that awareness. Even when they are rejected, they can bounce back from being yelled at. However, if someone has the patience to wait for the perfect time, they cannot get past the realization that all of their strength is in vain. That's a kind of lesson that haunts them, not simply bruises their pride. You expose that their cohesiveness was based solely on you as the adversary number 7. They were never truly united, despite their claims to be. It was not founded on mutual regard, trust, or a common goal. You were the foundation of it. More precisely, it was based on their mutual distaste for you, their fixation on containing you, and their necessity of viewing you as their adversary. They were kept together by that glue. They had no real foundation without that, and the fissures appeared as soon as you outwitted them, because they're left staring at each other with nothing left to hide behind when you're free of the character they put you in. This is the risk of partnerships based on animosity. Since everyone is focusing their energies on the same goal, they initially feel powerful. However, the strength isn't genuine. It's borrowed. It's not deep. It only lasts as long as the adversary they're battling remains in existence. The entire link begins to break the moment that enemy moves differently, matures, or breaks out of the box they were put in. That's what you let them know. In reality, they were only united by their mutual reliance on you being the antagonist in their tale. They can no longer pretend to be together without you taking on that role. They must engage directly with one another. The truth then comes to light. As soon as their scapegoat is removed, all of their hidden agendas, jealousy, and mistrust come flooding out. Their internal fissures were hidden by the distraction you provided. Those cracks are now opening quite broad. The irony is incisive. In actuality, you brought together the very people who said they were united against you. Furthermore, you weren't simply let free as you moved out of their grasp. You revealed their true fragility. Strength was not what their alliance was. It was cooperation cloaked in weakness. They are now being devoured by that weakness. They'll make an effort to reconstruct. They will attempt to reorganize. However, things won't be the same, because they will be reminded of one indisputable reality each time they gaze at one another. As long as you were bearing the burden of being their shared enemy, their relationship was strong. Without it, all they have left is the disarray of their own mistrust, and they are unable to ignore that reality. They believed they knew your breaking point number 8. You demonstrated your lack of one to them. They were positive they knew who you were. Everyone they believe has a breaking point. There comes a time when the strain, the deception, the manipulation, or the weight of ongoing resistance is too much to handle. They had been depending on that. They believed that you would eventually break if they pushed you hard, long, and in the proper ways. Their whole control strategy was predicated on the idea that you would eventually give out and collapse. However, the entire structure they had constructed around your alleged weakness collapsed when that time never arrived and you refused to give up. For them, the disturbing reality is that they misinterpreted your composition. They believed that resistance would eventually wane. Strength was conditional, and endurance was transient. They failed to realize that you don't borrow your strength. You're born with it. You don't turn it on whenever it's convenient. It's fundamentally who you are. They were anticipating a non-existent version of you, and it became increasingly obvious that their estimations were incorrect the longer they waited. Your resistance to break broke so badly because of this. It was more than just enduring the stress. It aimed to demonstrate the lack of a basis for their strategy. If their plan's main goal was to break you, and you refuse to do so, the entire concept falls apart. Their moves become weak all of a sudden. They appear frantic. Their efforts don't seem well thought out. They appear pitiful. Worst of all, they lose faith in their capacity to anticipate and manage human boundaries. More devastating than any bodily loss is the psychological one. Someone loses all leverage when they understand they can't force you to collapse. Threats don't work. Lies don't stick. There's no purpose to any pressure. They thought they had power because they could define your threshold, but you've taken that away from them. They must now face the fact that you don't have one. What worries them the most is that you've proven to be unbreakable, not just a survivor. And after they see it, they will never be able to approach you in the same manner. They know deep down that there is no breaking point to look for and no control pattern that can work on you. So all subsequent attempts will feel futile. You made them face their own insignificance. Number 9. Comparison was the foundation of their entire sense of significance. For them, having power had nothing to do with actual strength or talent. It was about keeping you underneath them, standing over you, and using your struggle as evidence of their supremacy. They persuaded themselves of their height. Their height, however, only existed because you were designed to kneel. They never had the illusion of dominance. From your decreased posture, it was borrowed, and as soon as you got up, that delusion vanished, making them confront the harsh reality of their own insignificance. That's why they were so genuinely uneasy about your ascendancy. You didn't simply switch roles. Their sense of reference was destroyed by you. They have nothing to compare themselves to if you are not under them. The moment you don't pretend to be the one below, their magnificence vanishes. They are now left vulnerable, taken off their pedestal. They no longer appear to be strong. They appear to be typical. They don't appear imposing. They appear insecure. And since their whole identity was based on being viewed as superior to you, they are unable to cope with that reality. Ironically, they weren't diminished by your strength. It showed how big they really were. They had always been little and relied on keeping someone else below them in order to feel important. However, you forced them to confront themselves without the illusion when you got up. They must now confront the reality that their authority was never real. Manipulation, falsehoods, and the belief that you would never rise support it. Since there is no way to go back to the previous vision once the curtain is drawn, that realization consumes them. People also begin to realize that their status was exaggerated, that their authority was never real, and that they used your submission to look powerful. What appeared to be confidence now appears to be vulnerability. What appeared to be control now appears to be dependency. You didn't simply set yourself free. They were exposed by you. They now have to face the agonizing fact that they were never giants. You hadn't yet reached your maximum height, so they appeared tall, although they were always small and normal. Everything they believed themselves to be can be destroyed by that reality alone. 10. You demonstrated that fear cannot withstand action. Their biggest investment was fear. They didn't have to physically shackle you. They only needed to keep you mentally immobilized. They used uncertainty, doubt, and overthinking as their instruments. As long as you didn't move, fear was still alive. However, the entire organization fell apart the moment you took action. Because there is one deadly flaw in fear. It cannot withstand being in contact with action. Fear lost its grasp on you as soon as you took even a tiny step, and you had nothing left to cling to. They were never ready for that. Their whole plan relied on you lingering on the brink of possibility, reliving what-if possibilities until you were exhausted. They reasoned that you would remain trapped if they could increase the danger, the possible losses, and the reminder of all your previous failures. Perhaps it even worked for a time. However, the pivotal moment occurred when you understood that taking action not only confronts fear, but also reveals it. Because you find that most of what fear threatened was smoke rather than substance when you actually take a step forward. What shook them the most was that they spent a lot of money trying to make you afraid, just to have that dread instantly go away. They weren't prepared for the change since their leverage vanishes when terror goes. You can no longer be intimidated by them. They cannot stop you from growing. Furthermore, they are unable to control a lack of reluctance. They never use their power to stop you. The crown chakra connects you to divine wisdom when you give with joy. The Lord loves a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 7. Sow $20 into holy voices today and align with higher guidance. Convincing you to stop yourself was the goal, and their power vanished the instant you refused. Action multiplies, which is its beauty. One action leads to another. As momentum increases, the seemingly unachievable becomes the new normal. They're attempting to cast shadows at you while they're motionless. However, someone who is already out in the open is not frightened by shadows. What scares them now is that you've learned that true power is not fear. It was merely a narrative that was told loud enough to prevent you from trying it out. The roles have now been reversed. You've demonstrated that the moment you take action, their most potent weapon loses its effectiveness. They are aware that they will never be able to capture you in the same manner again as a result. You're no longer owned by fear. They also don't without it. 11. You turned into the question they are unable to respond to. You didn't merely surprise them. You turned into the question they are unable to respond to. It's not just that you did something out of the blue. It's because being honest about it would reveal all they've been keeping hidden. They are currently caught, vacillating between silence and half-truths because of this. Because what you just did cannot be covered by any version of their story. They acknowledge their error if they acknowledge the truth. Twisting it makes the holes visible. If they remain silent, it will appear as though they are guilty. Your move puts them in a corner, no matter what. Being able to define you was the foundation of their entire confidence. They wanted the final say on your identity, your capabilities, and your purported limitations. But like a blade, your actions sliced through that story. It was more than merely disproving them. The goal was to leave them without a plausible reason. Because in order to explain you, they would have to expose the plots, deceptions, and tactics they have employed to confine you. And they can't afford to do that one thing. You are now so harmful to them because of this. They can no longer ignore or target you as a person. They are unable to reconcile your inconsistency. Your reality causes every system they created, label they applied to you, and whisper campaign they launched to abruptly crumble. People take note, and inquiries begin to circulate. How could this have happened if they were so certain about you? Why couldn't they stop you if they were aware of your boundaries? Why does their story no longer make sense if it was true? Every unresolved query erodes the power they had possessed. This is worse than losing, in their opinion. Even while defeat can be explained, there is still a mystery, a paradox, or a real-life example that defies their narrative and lingers and haunts. It's not only you that ruin their plans. You serve as a continual reminder that their statements are not consistent with reality. Furthermore, it becomes increasingly clear that they lack an answer as they frantically search for one. That's what you accomplished brilliantly. You weren't merely acting. They are unable to remove the question mark that you became. And each time they attempt to defend you, they simply serve to further expose themselves. They no longer just have no control over you. It is impossible for them to define you. 12. The luxury of pretending was taken away by you. You pretended to take away their favorite shield. They were protected for so long by appearances. To conceal their fears, they created pictures, assumed armor-like costumes, and polished their lies until they were so dazzling that they could be mistaken for the truth. They could continue the act as long as you remained where they wanted you. However, you denied them that luxury when you made a move that completely defied their expectations. All of a sudden, there was no mask to hide behind and no script to follow. What emerged from them was terribly true, unvarnished and raw. At that point, everything changed. Because strength and composure are what are left when the charade fails. It's desperation, envy, and panic. They were no longer able to hide it. Their errors became apparent. Their speech were too unsteady. their emotions too fast. The difference between what they used to be able to keep neatly tucked away and what now spills out in front of everyone is evident. The polished persona they have fought so hard to uphold is suddenly wildly at odds with their true selves. This is what exposure costs. The world finally notices the discrepancy between a person's image and reality when they are unable to lie any longer. And for many, that divide is heartbreaking. They no longer appear invulnerable. They appear frail, flawed, and human. Their rage no longer appears to be a sign of moral fortitude. Insecurity appears to be leaking through. They no longer appear wise by their silence. It appears to be a dread of being discovered. Now that the curtain has been drawn back, every action they take exposes more than it hides. You didn't merely surprise them. You prevented them from returning to the ease of performance. Truth cannot be unseen once it has been seen. Those who are observing are unable to ignore the difference. They are now starting to wonder how much of their control was genuine in the first place. Even though they formerly loved it, they're rattled because of this. The one thing they could always count on, their safe haven, was pretending. However, you took it apart without even having to confront them. You just made a movement that made their mask come off. And now that their costume has been taken off, they are left standing in the open, exposing a reality that they have been fighting so hard to conceal. 13. You clarified the distinction between influence and control. They always thought that control and influence were synonymous. They saw the ability to influence people's beliefs, mold stories, or influence them in particular ways as evidence of their unlimited authority. And it worked for a time. Because people followed their lead, influence gave them the appearance of control. However, your action exposed a reality they were unwilling to acknowledge. Influence is only effective if others choose to accept it. Their so-called control vanishes the moment the agreement expires. Their entire structure fell apart because of this distinction. Persuasion is influence. Authority is control, assuming no one would ever dare to oppose them. They blurred the distinction between the two. They interpreted their influence as control as long as you allowed it. However, you demonstrated how flimsy their authority was when you stopped agreeing and acted independently of them. They had absolutely no control. All they were doing was taking it from those who let themselves be swayed. They were compelled by your behavior to recognize the discrepancy between reality and perception. They believed that their power was unstoppable, but it depended on your willingness to take part. Their voice became weak after you separated. The results of their interventions were not the same. There was less significance to their presence. Without consent, influence is just noise, and you made them into precisely that. They're so shaken now because of this. Control is irreversible. Influence is contingent, and by refusing to comply, you expose that condition. Their dominion of persuasion appears to be weak all of a sudden. It appears to be dependency. They relied on other people accepting their interpretation of events, and their basis fell apart the instant you broke that agreement. What they believed to be immovable was actually paper-thin and could only be held together by cooperation. They had lost it. Accepting what this indicates about their identity is the most difficult thing for them. They were no kings. They exerted influence. They had no authority. It was borrowed by them, and the illusion vanished as soon as you stopped giving them that authority. The most obvious version of the truth was exposed by your move. Influence disappears the instant people lose faith in it. But control is a real thing. They are unable to cast their spell again because you broke it. 14. They realized they were up against a spectral form of you because of you. You weren't being fought. They were battling the mental image of you that they had created. It was simpler to manage, forecast, and attack that phantom form. They convinced themselves that it was the true you after stuffing it with of their presumptions, lies, and personal shortcomings. Every plan, tactic, and scheme they created was intended to vanquish that shadow. But everything they believed they knew crumbled as the real you appeared. Their preparation was never focused on reality. So all of a sudden it meant nothing. They are now shaken because of this. They believed they understood you, but their knowledge was really a projection. They interpreted humility as frailty, patience as surrender, and stillness as weakness. They named its certainty after drawing inferences from fragments. The worst error they made was assuming that the version they created would keep you frozen. However, they are unable to explain growth. They are unable to forecast transformation. He showed up as the living truth they were never ready to confront, not the ghost they practiced for. The risk of underestimating someone is that your mental war is the only one you believe you are winning, unaware that the actual battle had not yet begun. They rejoiced in victory over a ghost, and they weren't prepared when you eventually came forward. Their relationships, their lies, their weapons, all of it was directed toward a non-existent goal. They arrived ready to confront the ghost. However, they found themselves staring at you, and they were powerless to stop the difference. As they realized how much energy they wasted fighting shadows, they are now forced to relive everything. Since it makes them acknowledge that they never truly touched you, the truth hurts. Their attacks all hit the air. Every tactic they used failed. What they perceived as advancement was only circular motion. Additionally, their efforts were absurd when the real you showed up. They are unable to recover from that wound. Losing to the opponent you trained for is one thing. Realizing that the opponent you practiced against never existed is a different matter entirely. The phantom they created wasn't you. You were something more resilient, sharper, and stronger. The worst reality is now known to them. The true you has no defense from them. What happened was not a minor hiccup. They completely dismantled what they believed to be true about you. You uncovered the illusion they were depending on. They relied on their story, but you rendered it worthless. You exposed patience as calculation, but they mistook it for weakness. They confused unity with allegiance, force with power, and influence with control. And you exposed all of those falsehoods. Their entire blueprint vanished the instant you deviated from it, leaving behind the raw smallness they had been concealing all along rather than the strong image they had portrayed. You simply outmaneuvered them. The entire game was rewritten by you. You turned into the uncontrollable variable. They are unable to respond to the query. The evidence of their true helplessness when control, deception, and fear fail. The ghost version of you they created was the foundation of everything they constructed, and they had no strategy, no defense, and no disguise that could withstand it when the real you appeared. That's what makes this moment so beautiful. You didn't have to yell. You didn't have to demonstrate. You didn't have to give an explanation. The demise of their plans was your very presence at full power. They are now forced to examine not only you, but also themselves, their partnerships, their tactics, and the deceptive persona they maintained. The reality is straightforward, but harsh. For you, they were never ready. They won't ever see you or themselves the same way again now that you've relocated. Don't simply leave the game if this message resonated with you deeply and caused you to see it for what it truly is. There's more truth that they don't want you to hear. So click the subscribe button and stay tuned. If this video resonated with you, please like it. To express your opinions and help someone who needs to be reminded that they are not helpless, leave a comment. Distribute it. Distribute it. Let the appropriate people discover it. This goes beyond content. The world needs more clarity like this. Continue to be blessed. Your giving is not just money, it is energy. As you open your heart chakra through generosity, heaven opens for you. Give, and it will be given to you. Luke 6, verse 38. Bless Holy Voices today with $25 or more through Super Thanks. Beloved soul, if this message has spoken to your heart, don't let it end here. Click that like button so the light can spread to more people who need hope. Subscribe to Holy Voices so you never miss the next word heaven has for you. And leave a comment below. I read everyone and I pray over them. Remember, faith grows when we share it. So share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. Until we meet again, may God's peace cover you and His voice guide your every step.